Yeah. So one of the things that's coming up for me as you're saying that is that unfortunately there's so much trauma and fear baked into the system. It's how we're controlled is by the trauma in our bodies. And Resmaa Menachen's work about
Yep.
trauma in white bodies and black bodies, and so I'm so struck by what you're saying is that we can't show up for those conversations unless we're first going to address the trauma in our bodies, in our systems, in our people, in our people groups, our communities. Because yeah, if you come to me and say, Heather, this caused me harm, I'm going to react from my place of trauma that I don't have enough worthiness to stand in that place of actually
That's right.
meeting you in that conversation. So can you say more about, what you've done personally, but also what you work with clients in terms of addressing that kind of limitations within the systems and within communities?
Yeah. I, this work does not happen without happening on, right, the somatic, right? Like we have to understand the deep, deep generational trauma. And like, we got to be more nuanced humans than we actually are. So I got to understand that and carry that. And I also have to let go of my ego in those moments when we're in those conversations. And I have to understand what are my defense mechanisms in those moments. Or again, when they're called out, I got to have deep trust in Heather. So when Heather says, hey, Adaway, in that moment, you didn't show up as your best self in that moment. I got to trust and believe that ultimately you got my best interests at heart. And you're telling me this. We don't take feedback from people we don't trust. And I think ultimately there's a deep lack of trust because we don't trust ourselves, so we don't trust other people. Mm-hmm. I don't trust myself in these moments, my gut. I don't trust that, yeah, I can be wrong too. Right? I remember when my kids were little, and I've seen all these parents who are like, my kid could never. And I would always say, my kid absolutely would. If given the opportunity, they can and they will and they would, if given the opportunity. And I always went into any discussion about my children with that in place. They are loving, kind, caring, and they also will do all the crap if given the opportunity. Yeah. And I do that about myself. I am kind and loving and caring and will fuck up just like everybody else. Right? And can show up super harmful to other people. Yeah. And so it takes a level of awareness. The work that we do, that we talk about, happens on the personal, the interpersonal, the systemic as well. Yeah. So we have to constantly be working on all those levels. I don't want you to be just focused on your own personal trauma and then forget what's happening through systems, through policies, through practices. And I don't want you to only focus on the policies and practices if we're not going to talk about your shitty managers and their horrible behavior. Yeah. And we have to allow folks room to be other than who society tells us they are, right? So I have to allow you to be a white woman, and I also have to allow you to be Heather all at the same time. And I'm going to hold both those nuances. And I'm going to be like, Heather Platt is my friend who does this amazing work, and I've watched her grow, and I was there when she was writing, holding space, and saw all of that happen. And Heather's a white woman in a system, right? And there are things that Heather may not see or understand, not because Heather can't, but because the system has made it so Heather doesn't have to. I got to be able to hold all of that nuance. That we have to hold that for everybody all at the same time. And we don't like that. We are not beings who enjoy holding that nuance. I want to look at you and tell you who you are and what you do immediately. And I want to look at you and tell you that there's only one kind of way for a white woman to be. There's only one kind of way for a Black man to be. There's only one kind of way for a queer person to be. We want to put people in such tight boxes that we don't allow them to have the space and room to do that internal work around how can they show up differently.